This Argentina squad, without a single doubt in my mind, has definitely written themselves in football's history. Winning 3 major trophies in a row, winning all of their last 11 games, losing only 2 of their last 63 games shows that this must be the arguably greatest national team of all time. Having a fellow Lionel Andres Messi Cucitini as the backbone and the leader of the team, and a camaraderie of Argentinian soldiers giving their everything for the little man. This squad is really something special, but obviously as the beautiful game is over a century old, this is not the only national team to achieve great things. Argentina is actually the second squad to win 3 major tournaments in a row, so there is definitely a big debate here. And thankfully we have all the statistics in the world to find the end of this debate. There are obviously all sorts of opinions that come and go, but numbers never lie. I'm here to settle it, so grab your favorite snack, drink something good, and enjoy the video. Now, as I was analyzing this topic, the first thing that I did was look at the opinions of other people and journalists, and I've come to the conclusion that the 1970 Brazil squad is definitely the greatest national team of all time, and that's pretty much the end of this video. But I think they are completely wrong. Not particularly saying that 1970 Brazil is not even close as the other teams, I just think that the websites switch the word great with the word best. This Brazil squad is definitely in the debate as the best national team of all time, with their dominant display at the 1970 World Cup, beating every opponent pretty easily and so on, but this here sums it up pretty much. Good players play well some of the time, great players play great all of the time. Or to make it have more sense here, great national teams played brilliantly for a certain tournament, but greatest national teams of all time played so brilliantly that they marked their own era for a certain period of football. On that note, I simply cannot see any team that wasn't the champion of the world in their respective continent at the same time be in this discussion. So when we look at it like this, you really have to be a historical group of players and staff members to achieve it, and on the other side, it narrows our nominees for this topic a lot. Now, as I said, they must have been world champions and continent champions at the same time, so with the first pick, I'm already going to break my own rule. 1958-1962 Brazil. They won back-to-back World Cups. That display was already seen before from Italy in the 30s, but there are so many rumors that the government and the dictator at the time were fixing games and deciding on who is going to referee certain matches, which leads to the fact that it doesn't make any sense to put them here. Now, as I said, I broke my own rule, but there was no way I was not putting the only team that won it back-to-back in this group with the blue and whites. Now, with the other nominees, it's rather simple. There are actually only 5 national teams that had the football crown of the continent and the world at the same time, so that means that we are left with 2008-2012 Spain, 2002-2004 Brazil, 1998-2002 France, and last but not least, 1972-1974 West Germany. So to stop all this continuous talking, who is it really? Who is truly the greatest national team of all time, and is Argentina actually in this discussion? Now, the most clear reason why they are the favorites is obviously because they won trophies that everyone dreams of. Because we know who the clear favorites here are, we will rather start with the bottom part. Everyone won the same trophies, a continental championship and the World Cup. Now, because they are all even accomplishments in the terms of silverware, there isn't a real way of comparing them. So we need to spread their time a little further. What that means is that we will take the major tournament before and after the dominant ones and see who accomplished more. Therefore, we got a clear 6th place here. France was out in the semi-finals in 96 and left the 2002 World Cup already in the group stage as the world champions, as the 4th place with 1 point. At the 5th place is Brazil, reaching the quarterfinals in the 2001 Copa America and the 2006 World Cup. Yes, France got to the semi-finals, but I would rather reach the quarterfinals twice for my nation than leave in the group stage as world champions. And West Germany got on top of the lower half here. That generation was so good. They reached the World Cup semi-finals before their incredible success, and after it they reached the Euros finals, which means that they could have been, with a little bit of luck, in the top 4 major tournaments in a row. Now, moving on to the top half, I separated them because I think that the achievements of these 3 by winning 2 World Cups in a row and winning 3 tournaments in a row is simply a level above. Brazil failed to achieve the same thing as Argentina and Spain, as they had 2 shots at the Copa America trophy, and on the other side, Spain failed miserably at the attempt of winning 2 World Cups in a row, as they were out in the group stage in 2014, but with Argentina we will have to wait and see what will happen at the 2026 World Cup. Knowing that I can only look at the silverware here, it is really really hard to decide, I must say, but I will have to give Brazil the third place here. They showcased that they weren't able to win 2 tournaments in a row by losing 2 Copa Americas by 1 place. I think these 2 failed attempts really put the fuel to the fire for them to win the 1962 World Cup, because the motivation was surely by a margin higher because of the failures in the South American Championships. On the other note, what I also want to say with this is that I can't comprehend where the hunger and desire comes from for Spain and Argentina to want to win another major tournament so badly, even though they are world and continental champions, is mind-boggling to me. The only thing I could do is look at the tournament before their reigning era and how they performed there, the same thing that I did with the bottom half. And unexpectedly, both teams went out in the round of 16, both teams went out against the French, and both of those French teams went on all the way to the final. So there is literally nothing I can do here to determine the first place, which means they must share the first place. Spain and Argentina are taking the first place in this part. The dominance. Who is actually the biggest threat to their opponent? Well, I will simply create a table, like a league table, analyzing every game of these 6 teams in their dominant era. Now we are going to look at their results in the major tournaments they have won in and the qualifiers for that tournament. One specific thing I'm going to add here is that only the first 19 minutes count, so if they won in the extra time, it still counts as a draw, as 1 point. Not only that I'm going to add the points, but the goal difference too. To be more fair here, I'm going to use how many points per game they were winning rather than points in total, as it will obviously be the same squads claiming the top spots again because they played more. Before showing the complete table, I will rather show you a graph. It is pretty simple. The more right, the more points per game, and the higher, the better goal ratio per game. So realistically, to be an all-time squad, you must be out of this zone and try to get as near as possible to the summit in the top right. So let's check it out. In the last place, surprisingly, is the 1958 Brazil, which I didn't expect at all. The Copa America was their kryptonite somehow, as it was played in a league system and they lost there a few times. Moving on to the next 2, at the 5th place is France in 98, and in 4th it's Brazil in 02. Even though France had more points per game, they were the only team to have a goal ratio under +1, so that edged it out for me between these 2. Now when you look at the next 2, it's pretty similar again between 2 legendary squads, but there's again a big stain on the Germans, like on the Le Bleu. They played the least games out of everyone. I know it wasn't their fault, but Argentina played just slightly worse than them, but for the double of their time. The reason they played so few games is because they were shorter tournaments back in the 70s and they hosted the 1974 World Cup, so they didn't have to play any qualifications for that. Now in their league of their own, or I would rather say in their own universe, Spain, with the most matches, most points per game, and the best goal ratio per game. In 30 qualifying matches, the Spaniards won 93% of the matches. It is absolutely absurd, so Spain takes the first place here easily. Here's the complete table of everything if you're curious. España was definitely the most dominant of all time and in front of the Argentinians, but are they the most dominant defensively? It is a team game after all, and you will never win titles with a great attack and not so great defense, and that's why this is our next section. Therefore, I'm going to look again at the same tournaments from these teams, and I'm going to look at goals conceded per game and clean sheets. And with the clean sheets, I'm going to make a percentage of what the chance is to have a clean sheet during a game. Alright, to not make it overly complicated here, I'm just going to give you another graph, and that will pretty much showcase to us how genius the stats from every team here are. It is the same as last time. The higher the bigger the chance that the ball is not touching their net during a game, and the more to the right, the more goals they conceded per game. So what that means, realistically, you want to be as close to the peak here as possible. And the Brazil squads have really similar stats at the worst end of the graph, but don't forget, they are the worst of the best, which means that both squads had still around a 40% chance of having a clean sheet on average, and having really similar stats, like mysteriously similar stats. The 2002 Brazil team was better than the 1958 Brazil again, but just by a tiny margin. They conceded 0.06 goals less per game than the other and had a better chance to have a clean sheet by around 3%. Now that is what you call déjà vu. In 4th place is the same team, France in the late 90s, and just a quick moment of appreciation for Fabien Barthez. Tremendously underrated goalkeeper and tremendously important for France at the time. Okay, let's move on. On the 3rd place is Argentina, and honestly when you just look at the paper, it doesn't make much sense that this Pack 5 was better than either of these. But when you watch the games, you realize that these 5 became Argentinian soldiers these past few tournaments and not the same defenders as at their clubs. The second on this list is West Germany, and you would probably think that Beckenbauer was the most important part of that. But actually, at the 1974 World Cup, every player in the defensive line did not have a rating under 7, and it would often happen that they had a better rating than the captain. For example, Schwarzenbeck, the central center back, had an average rating of 7.4, being slightly worse than Beckenbauer. And going back to the graph, Spain didn't fit on the graph. That's outstanding. They had 0.3 goals conceded per game, which means that every third game they would concede a goal, which means that they would go easily over 200 minutes without conceding a goal, and I didn't even add the qualifying games. In the 2010 World Cup, Spain didn't concede a single goal in the knockouts, and you can guess how many squads were able to achieve that. You guessed it right. None of them. In the 2008 and 2012 Euros, Spain didn't concede a single goal in the knockouts, and you can guess how many squads were able to achieve that. Well, Greece achieved it in 2004, but you can guess how many squads achieved it 2 times. You guessed it right. None of them. Well, because it is indescribable what they achieved, I will give you the full table with all the stats, and we will have to just move on to the last thing we are going to look at. The classic eye test. Which team was the most entertaining one to watch? Well, the obvious way to find out is to watch every possible game of every team here, but for my sincere sanity, we will watch just the goals because they are the most important thing in football after all. I will watch every goal of these teams in the major tournaments they won during their era and give them really simple ratings. 1 being the worst, like an unlucky bounce ball or a penalty, till 5 being something you never see, like a rocket from 30 meters. Now, I know this isn't the most perfect way to know who was the most entertaining to watch, but it will give us a big overview of that. And I'm going to be harsh with this, so it will be rare to see a 5 here. It must be really something special, even though I will probably never score even a tap-in in professional football. But hey,
it is what it is. It is what it is.
Like the last thing we looked at, we will give an average goal rating for every team, and that will determine their place here. Even though they made the saying Joga Bonito famous, both Brazil teams took the last places again, with the 2002 squad being the last and the 60s squad being second last. Like every other team on this list, because we are obviously talking about the greatest ever, they had some brilliant and iconic goals, especially these 2 teams, like the Pelé goal against Sweden in the final or Ronaldinho against England. The problem was that the worst goals outshined the better goals. Even though I had to deal with footage like this with the 60s Brazil team, they were still more entertaining than their successors. But to be honest, this was really entertaining to watch. The next place, or 4th place, is Argentina, having an average of 2.72, and the huge majority of the good goals came by someone whose name I don't even have to mention. If it wasn't for him, I hardly think this team would have been half as good as it was. They would get a pretty higher rate if it wasn't for penalties, as they had the most on this list, but there's nothing I can actually do about that. I can't just leave penalties to the side. The next team has a rating of just 0.01 better than Argentina, and it is West Germany. We could use the same argument that they played a lot less, but that would be pretty boring to do and repeat, so let's leave it like this. While watching West Germany, it certainly looked like a team from the future, having really entertaining team goals and some bangers in their arsenal too. And the next 2, or the best 2, don't have any goals rated as 5, but their consistency of good goals kept them at the top. Those are France, and obviously Spain took the top spot again with an average of over 3, and I'm starting to lose creative words to describe them. I think this really confirms the quote quality over quantity. They just outplayed their opponent like they were in training, as 80% of all goals were just scored using beautiful football. But Spain maybe misheard that quote and just said let's take both quality and quantity, as they scored the most goals out of everyone and easily more than France. Spain continues their tradition with being on the top spot. Alright, we are at the end. The complete rankings of the whole video have been added up, and like this example here, the first place got 6 points and the 6th place got 1 point. I added all of the points up and found the final ranking. Now there is a tie actually at the last place, and you probably got used to someone seeing battling for the last place. Those are the both Brazilian teams. I thought there was no way the names of Pelé, Rivaldo, Ronaldinho and so on would battle for the last place, but also on the other side they ended up in the discussion for the greatest of all time, which makes it then understandable. The Brazil squad of the late 50s started really well, being third at the first topic, but they managed to be the last place almost everywhere afterwards. The 4th place takes the French team of the late 90s. They started the video off at the last place, but after every category they got 1 place up and eventually ended up beating the both Brazilian teams. Now going to the worst of the greatest of all time, it is West Germany. Played entertaining football, played dominant football and dominant defense. They definitely deserved it, and with a little bit of luck with the previous and next tournament, as I said, they could have been the greatest of all time. Definitely one of the biggest what-ifs in football's history. And we have an answer to my second question from the start. Argentina was definitely in this discussion, seeing them most of the time at the top of the statistics, but the blue and whites are a far second place rather than the greatest. But no matter the fact, the Argentinians should be really thankful to witness this. It was also one of the most perfect football stories, seeing Messi shooting his last shot at the most majestic award and them completely exceeding all expectations with the Copa America wins before and after. But hey, We definitely found the kings of national football. Completely deserved, the 2008-2012 Spain is the greatest combination of players, coaches and staff we have ever seen on the international stage, and I dare to say that we will not see a greater one in our lifetimes. Even if Argentina lifts the World Cup again in 2006, it will not change my opinion. These guys did it without conceding a single goal in 3 knockout stages in a row, while giving us some of the most entertaining football to watch. Someone who I can see being greater is someone who wins 5 major tournaments in a row maybe, or someone who wins 4 major tournaments in a row the same way Spain won it, which is inexplicably difficult to do. So for now, they are the greatest national team of all time.